Being an amazing product marketing leader doesn't happen by chance. It happens by habit. Product marketing certified leadership has been built on the back of decades worth of experience from some of the world's best known brands with one goal in mind: helping you be the best leader you can be. Crammed with real life case studies, over 12 hours worth of content, templates, exams, and more, this course is everything you need to lead with authority, confidence, influence, and innovation. Every piece of material within the 7 modules and 29 chapters has been vetted, tested, and approved by senior level product marketers from companies like Amazon, Uber, and HubSpot, serving up game-changing insights throughout. By the time you've wrapped up the final module, you'll be able to define what it takes to be a great product marketing leader, build and scale your team, understand how to successfully manage your existing team, use methods for leveraging data, know how to become the voice of the customer, understand how teams work cross-functionally, and improve your strategic thinking. The beauty of the course is you'll have the freedom to work your way through the modules at a pace to suit you. It's 100% self-paced. You'll even get lifetime access to the curriculum, paving the way for refresher sessions forevermore. Visit productmarketingalliance.com to get leadership certified and spearhead your journey to the top.
Hi everyone, and I hope you are enjoying day 4 of the Product Marketing Festival. We have had an epic few days of content being broadcast out through LinkedIn Live, and today is no different. We are launching into a fantastic session now with Chris Hines from Zscaler, and yeah, very delighted to welcome you to the virtual stage, Chris. So over to you. And just before that, I want to remind everyone we are doing a live Q&A at the end. So any comments, things you want clarification on, or yeah, questions for Chris, get them in through the session, and I'll see you back here in about 25 minutes.
Phenomenal. Hey, Rose, thanks so much. And to the entire Product Marketing Alliance, thanks for the time here. Super thrilled to get a chance to speak with the audience about a subject that I think is super, super important, the subtle art of winning through customer centricity. So a little bit about myself. I've been in product marketing about 10 years, currently at a company called Zscaler. We are a cloud security company. We help individuals connect to applications from anywhere in the world, from any device, using our cloud delivered service. And I have the wonderful honor of working on the product marketing team as the director and solutions marketing lead for one of our key solutions here at Zscaler. But enough about me. More about kind of the subject at hand today. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of start off with this information that came from the product marketing report from 2020. And the thought here was just to get a feel for what's the sense of culture when you think about customer versus product, sales, etc. And we find, without surprise, that in most cases, a lot of companies, especially because they tend to be engineering focused, lead with the product first model. So we see about 36% of organizations lead from a product first perspective, which is actually the most common out of any. So not really surprising. It's good to see that about 1/3 do focus on the customer centric piece. But I will question them because I feel like in some cases from a customer first perspective, you still tend to lead with a product conversation from a messaging standpoint. So let's talk a little bit about that. We're product marketers here, or maybe some of you might be in demand gen or sales, but our natural kind of propensity is to focus on our actual product itself. But it's a very kind of inward focus, right? We're focusing on only what we do and things like what are some of the new products that are coming up down the roadmap? What are some of the new cool tweaks that we're making to the existing product, enhance it in some way? You could be even highlighting some of the new hot features, or we tend to gravitate towards like what are some of the product integrations we have with larger companies like Microsoft and Salesforce, whoever it might be. But if you think about it, the conversation is always around the product. So it's like we're telling the world all the great things that we do. Now, the challenge from a customer perspective is it doesn't really feel like it's for them. And I'm sure many of you have been in meetings, maybe as a product manager leading a conversation at the earlier stage or in terms of the sales engagement themselves, and you start to see customers almost have this reaction, right? And it's funny, on Zoom and in the remote world, they're limited to just a little square there, right? So you can get a really zoomed in effect of kind of the moment that they make a face like this, right? Because we just start sounding just like every other vendor pitch that's promising them some amazing product that may or may not even solve their needs. So the perspective needs to shift from what we do to the problems and challenge that we're solving for our customers. And that's where this notion of customer centricity comes in. Now, my intent behind this presentation is not to go into a deep dive and talk about the definition of what customer centricity is. At the end of this, you're going to have some very tactical things that you can take away and implement within your very own company, right? But customer centricity is this notion where your whole company has a shared ethos where everything you're doing is about placing the customer in the middle and helping them have the best experience possible. This is from not just a business philosophy perspective, but the way that you design your products, the way that you operationalize your business as well is built around this notion. Now, the image you see here is actually from Salesforce. I think they do a phenomenal job of looking at things from a customer-centric model, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is to gather information from your customers so that you can define and build the best solutions out there. And ideally, it's with them. You start to see this trend in the market, right? Whether they're from any of the very popular logos that you see here, from Zscaler, Amazon, Lyft, you name it. We're starting to see a shift in the industry away from classic point products to actually services. So maybe you don't own the infrastructure itself, you're paying some kind of subscription to host it and manage it. My wife recently just bought a new car, and we're selling our old car on Carvana, which is this really cool service where they can come to your house, buy it, and take it away, right? As many of us are dealing with the reality of COVID-19 and work from anywhere, Airbnb and companies like Vrbo have taken off. Why? Because we all want to get out into the world and stay somewhere unique, but do it in a safe way. So this notion of service focus is driving the need to actually think more so about the customer themselves. So this idea of customer centricity, think of it as the main catalyst. So when you think about the art of it, like what are the brushstrokes required to actually adopt this model, to move it from just this cool sounding theory to an actual practical reality? And that's what we're going to talk about here, giving you the brushstrokes and the understandings of how to actually do that. The most important piece, when you think about the beginning of it all, is you need to understand what are the touch points that you have with your customers, but even before that, what is the actual journey that they're going on to make a purchase or upgrade or buy more of your service itself? So the start point, what is the actual need that a customer has for your potential solution? You have to understand that, because everything you build, from a message, from a story flow, from a content perspective, is based on understanding this. Now, over time, as people matriculate through, from the start piece of perceived need to searching for the actual alternatives themselves, right? We tend to see that over 90% of our customers' decisions are actually made prior to actually engaging with us, right? So they're self-servicing, they're self-researching and educating themselves on things like videos, websites, analyst briefings. Right? If you're in the B2B space, many of you probably heard of analysts like Gartner and Forrester, who are helping them define some of the needs and criteria before they even engage with some of these vendors. Right? So once they search for these alternatives, they figure out a few, maybe 2 or 3 that they really care for, then they engage with the vendor themselves. This is very much the point where we have our first kind of face-to-face reaction or communication. Maybe it's in some kind of executive briefing center in person, or it's a Zoom or Microsoft Teams call. And we engage with us. The next piece is they make some kind of purchase. So if you are on a subscription piece, maybe they're swiping a credit card. In most cases, if you're focusing on larger size companies, there's something a little bit more hands-on from the purchase perspective. They use the service. And of course, over time, since many of you are selling solutions and services, you need to go deep and wide, right? So it's less about a transactional sale. It's more about how do you continue to provide value for a customer over an elongated period of time. So this notion of upgrading and buying more is incredibly important to first understand. So be honest with yourself. Like, there are many companies and really product marketing organizations within those companies that don't have clarity in terms of what that customer journey is and how it's customized to your exact needs. So research that, find it out, because this is a great starting point for thinking about things at a more customer-centric level. Now, at the bottom, I've kind of called out what are some of the important things that you want to consider. This is not just something that marketing is going to do. This is something that sales, product management, even your people in culture or HR organization has to think about. Again, I talked about the notion of a shared ethos, a multi-team effort coming together to understand the steps in the journey and build the right story along the way. There's different models here. If you think about Starbucks versus maybe Dunkin' Donuts, right? The high touch versus low touch. Starbucks is about the experience. You order your maybe more expensive coffee, but you sit down, you spend time there, maybe you catch up on some work, some emails. There's this model here where you're paying for the experience versus in Dunkin' Donuts, maybe you're on your way to a work site. Maybe you're trying to just kind of get in, get out, get your coffee because it tastes really good and leave. So think about that notion as it relates to your product as well. What you want to do is also consider the idea of what are the engagement points? What is the actual experience that your customers are having as they matriculate throughout this journey? You want to make those as unique and differentiated as possible so that the entire process, not just the purchase process, feels very customized to them. You're going to have to understand and be honest with yourself. Are you determining areas of friction? Maybe you're really good at getting people to engage with you from a vendor perspective, but making the purchase and that hop to a proof of concept to an actual closed deal is a challenge. Maybe you have a considerable percentage of your pipeline stuck within that purchase cycle. You need to look at that and develop ways to accelerate that and kind of grease the skids from that perspective. In some cases, you might want to look at this from a zoomed in, almost micro customer journey as well, where maybe the goal is to take someone from an existing customer to maybe an upgraded edition or bundle. So there might be a zoomed in path there where you think about what are the required touch points along that journey as well. Most importantly, I would say once you understand what your journey is, you want to make sure that you're building your story in the right way. Again, it could be great that you understand your journey, but if what you're saying is still how great your product is and these new features or integrations that you've developed, the message kind of falls flat from that perspective. So one thing that our company here, and I know several others, especially in the Bay Area here within California, have leveraged is this really cool company called StoryBrand. So if you haven't heard of them, check them out, go research them. They have this notion of something called the S7, the StoryBrand 7. And if you think about a way that a story works, there's 7 core components. So think about your favorite movie. I love Fast and the Furious. I know it's not going to win many awards, but it's super entertaining. Other people love Star Wars. At the end of the day, the typical flow is this. You have some kind of hero. So it could be Luke Skywalker, right? That hero seems to be really honest, great person, you almost want to be a friend with them, right? So again, the focus here is the hero, and the hero is about the individual. It's not about your product, right? That hero has a challenge. That challenge is in 3 different ways. Something really bad has happened to them that maybe they have no control over. They struggle with that emotionally from an internal perspective. Maybe they're sad about it, or they're confused, they're feeling overwhelmed. And then the third element of that challenge is that there's a philosophical challenge associated with that. So this feels wrong. There's no way that this terrible thing could happen to Luke Skywalker, right? His aunt and uncle are taking it from him because Darth Vader and all his crew go in and destroy their town, whatever it might be, right? There's this challenge, and it feels so wrong. Now, the third piece of that is that individual, that hero, meets a guide. You want to position yourself as the guide. You're Yoda. You're Obi-Wan Kenobi. You are not the hero in the story. So that perspective is a really important thing to just sit and think about for a second. If when you engage with a customer, either it could be an email, it could be a white paper, it could be a meeting, it could be a webinar, it could be an event like this, whatever it might be, think about, are you positioning yourselves in the right way? You're the guide because why? You have the experience. You've done it before. You're trusted by many others that are very similar to this potential prospect or potential customer that's come to you to help solve a need. You give them a plan. That plan is, maybe in Luke Skywalker's pieces, is use the force, right? And our idea from, as vendors and working at B2C or B2B companies is use our service. We call them to action. There's a specific CTA here that they have to go and do, right? Maybe it's, defeat Darth Vader, right? Whatever it might be. In the end, they're going to help them avoid a failure, right? So avoid whatever potential pain would have come out of if you weren't there to guide them. And in many cases, if it's a happy ending, there's some kind of success in the end, right? The the rebels win in the case of Star Wars, or even if maybe it's a bad ending, it's the hero in the story has learned something about themselves that they maybe previously didn't know before that. Maybe there's a divorce or the relationship ends at the end of the day, but the individuals are better off because of it, right? These 7 make up the core kind of framework of any story that you tell. And we've seen this and we've used this at Zscaler quite a bit. It works extremely well because it sets you up from an outline perspective. And by default, you're thinking things through at the customer-centric level, which of course is the most important thing to consider. Now, once you've actually understood your customer journey and you've designed this story, right? So you want to go through and be honest with yourself, right? Map out from a story brand 7 perspective, who's your hero in this case? Is there a key persona that you want to focus on? From a challenge perspective, understand what are they typically challenging, and you can look at maybe past experience that you've had with customers in the past. As a guide, you want to be able to call out things like, why do you have credibility in this space? Maybe use customer references, right, etc. Once you've mapped out that story from a customer-centric perspective, you then want to think about what are the different, and I call them feelers that are out there. So maybe, customer centricity is important. You need to be able to develop some kind of feedback loop so you're constantly having this idea of what customers care about. And I think this is one of the most overlooked things. I don't tend to see many product marketers or even marketers in general thinking about the different touch points that they have with customers, and then how to actually take those touch points, take the data, and leverage that going forward as well. I touched on this before a little bit, where many of you are going to be selling services. The selling model for a service versus a transaction is very different. Transaction has maybe a large pool of customers, right? They're just swiping a card and that's it. They typically don't maybe make repurchases. They're just here for an individual transaction. That's that. And there's some companies where that's their core business model. But most of you, in the case of services, are going to be in a point where maybe your typical audience or potential audience isn't massive. So what you need to be able to do is extract as much value from those customers as possible. So that's where the notion of upsells and renewals, annual contract value, and upping that on a per company basis becomes really important. So these feelers become a direct, requirement when you want to be able to go and, convey or articulate the value of the actual service itself. So I wanted to take some time and actually go through some examples. We've done this here within Zscaler. This is not our Zscaler Google Analytics. This is just a shot that represents kind of what we mean by this. But the notion here is to understand the digital being of your customer. So what are they typically engaging with, right? When are they engaging with it? Are you seeing trends in terms of content types or topics that you want to understand? And if so, what you want to do is double down on those, right? So this idea of a web feeler, the digital self of the customer, understand that. Use tools like Google Analytics. There's tons of other ones out there as well that you might want to consider as well from a customer-centric perspective. So that's one example here. Now at Zscaler, my team kicked off something called the Customer First Initiative. So we developed 3 feelers. The first one was, of course, this web-based example here. Another example was using executive briefing center conversations or EBCs. Some people call them virtual briefing centers, whatever it might be. There is so much information in terms of, especially on the prospect perspective, in terms of what customers are asking for. So if you are not typically involved in executive briefing centers or customer meetings, make sure you are. As product marketers, in some cases you're not presenting, in some cases you are. I always gravitate to the point where if you're going to be building the message and maybe the presentations that are used in those customer briefings, you want to be the one actually giving them versus being off to the side. It'll help you stand out, but at the same time, it'll also give you that feedback loop where you're understanding what customers are asking for, what are they struggling with, are there certain challenges with your message where you think they're gold, but the customer kind of is not understanding the value that you're trying to get out of it. So much goes on within those customer meetings that you can continue to just leverage. Now, you want to be able to collect some of that information, right? Maybe you do it at the vertical level, maybe not as intricate yet, you're not looking at verticals, doesn't matter. you want to be able to capture that information, that feedback, right, and work that into your overall customer-centric plan as well. And the third recommendation would be understanding the existing customer. So at Zscaler, we implemented something called customer clinics. So a couple of times a month, we offer these customer clinics, and what we do is essentially we reach out to a specific set of existing customers, and we meet with them about the service that they purchased. And we go through almost kind of, each session is different, but we deal with different topics around things we know that our customers tend to struggle with. Maybe it could be something around deployment. Maybe it could be something around, understanding one of the key components that are very differentiated from us, but maybe are just hard for a customer to actually implement in place or understand how to implement. It's a great opportunity to continue to educate customers. And what you'll do is remove some of the typical barriers that you have with those customers, right? Because maybe one of the reasons why they're not able to repurchase or buy more of your potential services, they're not understanding it from a value perspective as much as you need. So you can develop the proper tools to do that. In our case, we developed the customer clinics, but you might have an even more creative means of reaching out to that existing customer and helping them purchase more of your product. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And that's how you increase your annual contract value. Most subscription companies, one of the biggest metrics that you look for in terms of financial success is year-over-year growth. And are your existing customers staying? Are they buying more? This is a great way in which you can do that. So the combination of your web feeler, your customer meeting feeler, and then your existing customer meeting feeler in terms of VBC versus this, those are the three main ones that you want to be able to push for and leverage as part of your customer-centric model. Now, the last kind of core area is around segmentation. And I feel like this is, and I mentioned it here, obviously, it's one of the most overlooked areas when you think about marketing. Because as product marketers, maybe segmentation is done by demand gen. Maybe you feel like your role within that is maybe at a high level. You're dictating what persona are we going to go after, what's the message, and then all the segmentation, everything is handled by a different team, where they're figuring out that you're going to segment by company size or geography or whatever it might be. And the notion, of course, is to get to a point where you're leveraging segmentation in the right way. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Right? This particular image is from a leadership course that I took from the Wharton School of Management from the University of Pennsylvania. It's called Selling Through Customer-Centricity. I highly recommend it. If you haven't taken it, check it out. It's offered by the Wharton School, which is a phenomenal, academic school to be a part of and to learn from, to do a lot of good work there. In terms of segmentation, you have these kind of different options though. On the lower end, in terms of level of customization, you have kind of just general advertising. It's very cost effective from that perspective, but the level of focus is a little bit kind of less so from a segmentation perspective than some might want, right? So you have the opportunity for, in this case, to say your message kind of gets lost in the ether as well. On the right-hand side, you have this level of, super highly focused segmentation. So maybe you're launching something like an ABM program, account-based marketing. So it's super, super custom. There are some higher costs that are associated with that for that segmentation. But as the bulk of what you want to be looking at is kind of just having some kind of, classic segmentation strategy when you're kind of breaking up your potential audience into a couple of the key ways. And I'll kind of talk about that and what that looks like in a second. First off is understanding what are the ways in which you can actually do segmentation. So you can think of things like the geography of where that customer is working from. And many of us do this automatically. It's kind of like the low-hanging fruit when you hear segmentation. It's like, okay, we sell into a global base of Americas, EMEA, and maybe APJ as well. Let's just make it super simple. Let's focus on what the specific, Americas programs will be versus APJ versus EMEA. And we have some semblance of a breakdown of what the revenue structure is in terms of what we're generating year over year from each of those revenues. And if we're really, really, excited here, we'll look at things at the city level. Most kind of marketers do that. Or the second most common is the orange box you see here. We'll do it by demographic, by age of the individual, who they are, what their potential income is. You can look at, their title. Another demographic that's probably typically mentioned is, revenue as well. So if you're looking at certain revenue bands where maybe if you sell to a more, expensive or a larger audience because you sell at a higher price point, you might want to focus on companies who have large income, right? There's a variety of things you can look at. These are typically the two that everyone uses, geo and demographic. What we tend to forget are the additional two, so behaviors or psychographics. And I will state, you can use these individually, you can use a mix of these as well, depending on your situation. The behavior aspect is really interesting. So more so about like by age is different from demographic. When we say by age here from a behavior perspective, if you have a product that maybe skews towards maybe Gen Y or maybe a Gen Z versus a baby boomer, you want to be able to understand that, right? There's certain behaviors that people in that age group take that are different. So for example, if maybe you are going for someone who's in the teen age group between 13 and 17, maybe it's more about TikTok and their behaviors are using social media from that perspective to share all the cool experiences that they're having, or maybe on Instagram as well. Another thing you can look at are actually, what are their purchase patterns? So I think a really good example of this would be, of course, during work from home, a lot of us have started using more services, right? Maybe you're ordering services to deliver your groceries, for example. And maybe if you're more used to delivering your groceries over the internet or through a service, you're most likely have a higher probability of wanting to maybe order your food from that perspective as well, like DoorDash, or use some kind of home chef or service that ships you ingredients for a dinner that you would then use as a recipe to go and make your own dinner. So past purchases can provide a pretty good indicator in terms of what other similar behaviors that individuals want to take. You of course take that information to figure out a way to actually position that to your key personas that are important for you to sell your service. And the last piece is the psychographic perspective here. This is a little bit on the more unique side. I see less of this in the market than probably any of them. The idea is to look at personalities, look at key hobbies as well as indicators for potential buying behavior that you can look for as well. So again, understanding what the different segmentation strategies that exist are really important, and don't just limit yourself to the two in this little pink box over here, because those are kind of, while classic, are definitely missing a huge part of the behavior and actually the personality perspective as well. So once you do this and you select your actual segmentation strategy from that perspective, it's actually understanding who do you want to go after. So we're going to talk about 4 different things. How do you actually find and identify these are the segments you want to go after? You want to look at what those needs are across each of those different segments. I'll even give you a template that you can use to determine from a numeric perspective what makes the most sense from a business standpoint to go after. And then lastly, we'll talk about focus. So this is a really cool example. This is part of kind of a takeaway I had from the Whitman School of Management training course that I took as well. And the idea here was to figure out, what are your potential segments? In this example, I've broken down into 3. We are in the cloud security world. We compete with many other vendors in that space. And all of our key personas have some kind of, relationship with either security. Maybe they are on the network front, or they own the application, or they're responsible for the user experience on the end user perspective itself. So we looked at 3. We said pioneers, distressing ones, and security overall. So to come up with these 3, you got to think about, if you were to think about, 100 of your customers or prospects that you've spoken with and build a little bit of a profile for them, what would that look like? In the case of pioneers, it was, we are a cloud delivered service. It's more of a kind of a modern approach. We wanted to go after people who are more likely to be introducing newer technology and capabilities into their actual organization. So these are the pioneers, the leaders in the space who are not afraid to kind of try something new themselves, or in this case, be the first. The second segment were the distrusting ones. We started seeing that there were some customers where they didn't really want to go with some of the modern technologies because they didn't exactly have trust built up with them over time. So they were usually the ones who were going to adopt the technology, like a cloud delivered technology, a little bit later than others. They want to kind of wait to see how it works out. Not be the ones that go out and be the pioneers and try something new and be kind of on the maverick front. But they eventually do adopt the technology, right? At the end of the day, once they see enough customer references, once enough of their peers have actually gone out and adopted that technology already, they tend to take it on. And the last group that we selected was this notion about security overall. Didn't matter how the product worked. Didn't matter, how much it cost or what, from that perspective, it was, does it do what I need it to do? Does it provide the level of security? If it does not, it's not for me. So we looked at these 3 different segments once we identified them, and we agreed on this between product marketing, product management, and sales leader. Said, okay, what will be the next step there? The next piece is you look at the actual needs that are required across that. So the needs are consistent no matter who the segment is, right? Think of it like as your core persona, a customer you're trying to sell to, what do they need? In our case, it was they needed to be able to deploy quickly. So simple deployment was one of the most important factors. The other piece was, especially in the remote world, work from anywhere here, and even as people start to move back into the office, the idea of kind of a hybrid workforce, like user experience is everything. Because a lot of times the people who are using our technology are executives, they're people who are on the road, on the sales team trying to actually help close deals. They could even be B2B customers who are using our service to actually get access to the applications, and of course partners as well. So user experience is a very important need from our customer base. The third piece was around security. In our case, we're a security company we offer many services. Security is a large part of that. So world-class security. And then lastly, since we're a cloud delivered solution, reliability and being able to scale up over time is a really huge value factor from a cloud perspective. So we looked at our 3 segments on the top, right? The pioneers, the trusting ones, and security overall. And we ranked, from a 1 to 4, 1 being the highest for each segment. What's most important? So you see the numbers here, 1, 3, 4, and 2 in the case of pioneers. What you want to do is make sure that you don't really see any overlap of numbers between those. So like, for example, for simple deployment, you don't want it to be 1, 1, 1 across the board, because what that tells you is that you didn't do a strong enough job of determining your actual segment. So you don't want any shared numbers across that, because if so, your pioneers, and maybe there was another one, let's say, I don't know, Mavericks, they would share too many of the needs that were overlapped. And what that's going to do is kind of skew your results, right? You want clear, definitive segments, because that's the nature of what segmentation is. And if not, go back to the drawing board, fix it up. When you come back, you want it to look something like this, right? Differences across each of the actual fields themselves. Now, once you've actually determined those needs and ranked them, you actually want to understand how do you actually give weight to the different segments and the different criteria that's required. So for example, your selection criteria could be segment size. How large is the actual number of pioneers or distrusting ones or security overall? 1 being small, 3 being large. The growth rate. So how fast is this segment growing across each of these as well? Now, in my case, the example of pioneers, it was about a rating of 2. The distrusting ones was 1 and then 3, right? You get the point across each. The lifetime value to us. This is a really important one. Based on how you make money, your revenue, your business model, in our case, it's subscription sales, the lifetime value to us is across, a 1-year deal, 3-year deal. How do we upsell them from there? And our pricing that's kind of built into that. So if we understand that perspective and understand how the business makes money, we actually looked at and said, okay, each of these segments, what's the potential value to us? And we found that in the case of pioneers, that was about a 3, which is the highest you can get. Our value to customers is just as important. So you have the value to us as a company and to you, as well as the value that you're actually providing your service to the actual customer themselves. So the idea of 1 to 3. And then lastly, competition. How competitive is this space? So the scale here is a little bit different. 1 means it's a very highly competitive space. 3 is low competition. So you don't necessarily want to go for a high competition space because you have to compete with potentially people who are bigger than your organization. So number 3, this idea of low competition is important. Now the notion here is you add everything up. At the end of the day, you select the actual one that makes the most sense for your business, right? So in our case, it was the pioneers, the people who are willing to go and bring in new technologies, the people who value customer experience and scale and et cetera. So you want to actually clarify why you decided on this. It's a really good thing to do when you go to, speak with your demand gen team, et cetera, helping them understand the why behind it as well. So you determine what your segments are, what you focus on. Now, the little cheat sheet here is that really what you want to be able to do is kind of map here. There's typically 4 different types of customers that you're going to see out there. And you see them mapped here in these different color grids. The idea here is on the top is economic value to the customer. So what your service provides to them. And on the left, it's the customer lifetime value to you. So again, for them and for you. The idea here is you want to be focused on this top left. The best customers are the people where you have a huge amount of value that you're providing to them from a cost perspective and saving, or it makes sense for them to invest in your service. At the same time, they're going to be the ones that help you drive a ton of money year over year, and you can build long-term relationships with. Right? And you see kind of the descriptions of the other ones from there. I would say, the worst customers would be, of course, people where you have very little value to you over the course of their lifetime, and they don't like your product. Now, in many cases, those are the folks who most likely won't even become your customer to begin with. But I think just for posterity's sake here, understanding which of these four you're going after and making sure that you're going after that top left quadrant as much as possible and as effectively as possible as well. So the brushstrokes, I talk about a lot, a really short amount of time, and I talk fast. The idea of know the customer journey, right? Everything from the start point to not the end, the classic end, because you really want to end at the upgrade piece. How do you continue to allow them to continue to buy more over time? The second piece was telling a story that puts them at the center. They are the hero, not your product. You're Yoda and they are Luke Skywalker. Think about it from that perspective. Use that template in everything you do. It could be writing a short email as a follow-up to a virtual event that you just did, over the course of the last year. It could be a blog, you name it. It could be a video script. That story brand 7 becomes the template you use for a customer-centric story. Your feelers across web, prospect meetings, and even things like these customer clinics that you can set up to hear a feedback loop from existing customers and what they struggle with, so you can break those barriers down and drive additional value. Segmentation, and of course, knowing where to focus. In the end, for us, it was the pioneers because of the reasons that we stipulated. Now, when you do this correctly, there's a lot of great things that come out of it. And so it's not just the fact that you get to kind of feel better about yourself. The customer, of course, feels better as well. Look at it from this perspective. Your customers understand that you care about and understand their challenges. They're more likely to trust you as a result of that. Since you're not having conversations at the product level, where it's talking about speeds and feeds and features, you have less conversations around, do you have feature parity with some competitor, right? The conversation is at their value level, and deals close faster because of it. You're not focusing on trying to, outcompete or to show that you have some kind of capability that the customer is looking for, because you get to set the arena and have conversations within that arena, not have to deal with the customers themselves or the competitors in that space. The other piece is you get to stand out from every other company that's out there, right? If everyone else is saying product-centric, they're going to, rest assured, they're going to select a product that sounds like, or the solution that solves their problem. And if you understand more about them and telling a story in a way that shows them that, you're going to be differentiated as a result of that. The idea here is that when you look at things at a product-centric level, you are selling with things that you can build. The idea here is to build what you can sell, right? So this has implications not just on marketing, but also product management and the strategy as well. The product becomes just a conduit versus the customer-centric pieces around why we're doing this at all. This is something that you'll find that becomes an entire kind of company-wide ethos. Here at Zscaler, we have a corporate culture where customer obsession is one of our core pieces. Everyone we hire, we bring in, we want them to have that same level of understanding as well. Because when you're doing this, you're able to do so much. You're able to learn how you deliver services better than others. You are able to open up vectors with customers where they're sharing elements of their challenge that you maybe typically wouldn't have heard if you were to just talk about how great your product is as well. And at the end of the day, this is a means of where you can actually drive more revenue for the business. So super important to consider this. I implore you, go out and try to figure out ways to understand the journey, tell the story in the right way, push your whole company, not just your product marketing team, but your demand gen side, your product management team as well, to think in this way. I know that when you work with engineers and product managers, they tend to be very in love with their baby, right? But you're going to have to educate them on, as the face of the company, as really the message of the company, it's on you to go and push for customer centricity. And as a result of that, I think you're going to see some really great results. And these are just a few of what that looks like in terms of examples. So I appreciate your time, everyone. This has been great to be able to speak with you. I'd love for you to follow up with me, ask me any questions you want. I placed here my email address. I have my LinkedIn profile as well. And I'm happy to take any questions if we have time, or if I'm overrode, please let me know. But it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That was an awesome presentation. So much information there. We are a bit over time, but I'm going to squeeze in one question.
Sure.
So it's from Olga, and it is, how do you determine the rank for the needs across segments?
That's a great question. So it's going to differ by company. So I think a lot of it's going to be, some of it's, I wouldn't say common sense. You want to kind of do your research, look at some of the past experiences you've had. Think about your business model. Right? How do you make money? And then think about what's most important based on those needs. You were going to have to kind of rechange these and tweak them over time, right? To tune them out, or tune them over time. But this is a great kind of starting point. I think the really important thing there is just understand that there is a framework there, that you do need to be looking at certain points of criteria. The ones that I've outlined there are kind of important from a Zscaler perspective. Right? If you sell a cloud service, I would model it very similar to how I had them in this example as well, because it's going to kind of set you up for success. But hopefully you found that helpful, and I'm happy to share this presentation as well, so you have that template with you as well, Olga.
Absolutely great. Well, there's some lovely feedback coming in as well. People really enjoyed the session. So yeah, just want to say a massive thanks again for joining us, Chris, at the Product Marketing Festival. And stay tuned, everybody, because we have another presentation coming right up.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, everyone. Take care.